Midnight Drearies.
The sun had set long ago and the desert was cloaked in darkness. The only light came from the bus's headlights as it traveled down the desolate road. The bus driver, Tom, was tired and eager to finish his last run of the night. He had been driving Route 72 north from Scottsdale to Cave Creek, Arizona for years and knew every bend and curve like the back of his hand. But tonight, something was different. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but he felt uneasy. As he drove, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching him. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up and a chill ran down his spine. He shook it off and told himself he was being paranoid. The bus was empty, and there was nothing out here for miles. But then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw movement. He turned his head to look, but there was nothing there. He rubbed his eyes, thinking it was just his mind playing tricks. But when he looked back up, he saw it again. A shadowy figure darted across the road, disappearing into the darkness. Tom's heart raced as he tried to make sense of what he had just seen. Was it a person? A coyote? He couldn't tell. He decided to pull over and take a closer look. Maybe there was someone stranded out here and needed help. He stepped off the bus and into the crisp desert air. The silence was deafening. There was no wind, no rustling of leaves, no animals. Just the sound of his own breathing. He walked around the bus, shining his flashlight in every direction. But there was nothing there. As he walked back to the driver's seat, he noticed something odd. The bus's headlights were off. He shrugged and turned them back on. But as soon as he did, they flickered and died. He tried again, but they wouldn't turn on. Tom's unease turned to panic as he realized he was completely alone, in the middle of the desert, with no lights and no way to call for help. The city had banned cell phones, and if you were caught with one while you were working your route you could be fired. This was the very reason that was a stupid decision. But another driver had been texting and driving and ran over a family of 4 that had been in a crosswalk. Tom knew he had to stay calm and figure out a way to get back on the road. He decided to check the engine, hoping he could fix whatever was causing the headlights to malfunction. He opened the hood and shone his flashlight inside. The engine looked fine, but he noticed something strange. There was a dark stain on the ground, next to the engine. It looked like blood. Tom's heart raced as he tried to make sense of it. Had someone been hurt out here? Was he in danger? That's when he heard it. A soft, whispering voice. He couldn't make out what it was saying, but it sounded like it was right next to him. He spun around, shining his flashlight in every direction. But there was no one there. He heard the voice again, louder this time. It sounded like it was coming from the back of the bus. He cautiously made his way to the rear, trying to stay quiet so he could hear the voice more clearly. As he got closer, the voice got louder. It was unmistakably a woman's voice, whispering something he couldn't understand. He reached the back of the bus and swung open the door. What he saw made him scream in terror. There, sitting in the back seat, was a woman. But she wasn't just any woman. Her skin was pale and translucent, and her eyes were piercing through him into his soul. She was staring directly at him, and her mouth moved as if she was trying to speak. Tom stumbled backwards, falling to the ground. He scrambled to his feet and ran to the driver's seat. Tom's heart was racing as he jumped back into the driver's seat and slammed the door shut. He fumbled for the keys and turned the ignition, but the bus wouldn't start. He tried again and again, but it was no use. Panic set in as Tom realized he was trapped. The ghostly woman was still staring at him from the back of the bus, and he had no way to escape. The whispering voice grew louder, and Tom felt like he was losing his mind. He didn't know what to do. He closed his eyes and prayed for it to be over, but when he opened them again, the woman was standing right in front of him. Tom screamed and tried to push her away, but his hands went right through her. She continued to whisper in his ear, and Tom felt like he was being consumed by the darkness. Suddenly, there was a bright light, and the woman disappeared. Tom looked up to see a police car pulling up behind the bus. The officers approached him, asking if he was all right. Tom couldn't speak. He was still in shock from what had just happened. The officers noticed the blood stain on the ground and asked Tom if he knew what had happened. He shook his head, unable to form words. They searched the area and found the body of a woman nearby. She had been murdered and left in the desert. Tom was never the same after that night. He quit his job as a bus driver and moved away from the desert. He couldn't shake the feeling that the woman's ghost was still with him, whispering in his ear. Years later, Tom was found dead in his home. The cause of death was unknown, but those who found him said there was a look of terror on his face. Some say that the ghost of the murdered woman had finally claimed him, unable to let go of the one person who had seen her in her final moments. To this day, people still talk about the crazy bus driver who encountered a ghost on his lonely, isolated route out in the Sonoran Desert at night. Some say they can still hear her whispering voice in the darkness, and they avoid that road at all costs.